So I'd like to introduce everybody to Elan Lift. So Elan, can you turn your picture on? There you
Thanks,
go.
Ted.
And I'm going to mute myself and go ahead and take it from there.
Well, thanks so much, Ted. Hi, I'm Elan. I have been doing space stuff only recently, really. I found myself with a little stupid telescope, a department store thing, and tried to use it, ended up jamming paper into the lens to get it to fit right, and then I couldn't see anything anyway, and I finally peeked Saturn through it. I knew where it was going to be. I found the rings, and I was blown away, and I chased Saturn with this little rinky-dink telescope through the sky until it had set in the horizon. So that got me hooked. I started at the NEAG Planetarium at the Reading Public Museum, just learning more about astronomy, and then just learned about what was around me. I was starting to learn more about the stars and planets and things I could see and some of the science and history, but I wanted to go out and look at the stuff. And so I found myself just going out with little stupid telescopes, seeing what I could see, doing little Messier marathons where I could, but mainly starting with the planets. What I found was when you bring a piece of equipment out, everybody's interested. There was a concert in downtown Reading here in Berks County, and right afterward, I set up my telescope on the corner facing south. We had the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars all lined up. I don't know how many hundred people looked through, probably a $50 telescope or something like that. It was really terrible, but they saw the rings of Saturn. They saw a couple of the bands of Jupiter, and even the dominoes guy stopped and took a look. So I've been doing just a little bit of urban astronomy, and for the moon phases, the week before and after the full moon is great for public outreach. But on the contrary, going out and doing deep sky stuff is also something I'm toying around with. I'm learning a little bit more. Um, and I noticed that these warehouses were put in just across a highway. There were really no lights around before, and the warehouse is using fully shielded lights and dimmer lights facing down, but you bounce it off an empty parking lot and you ruin the sky as well. So we'll talk a little bit about light pollution, what we can do to prevent it, and other things with light pollution. And so Ted and I got to talking, brainstorming what we could do, and he came up with this science project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch from my view. I'm going to share my screen. Let's try this, and we'll hit share. Okay, so here we have the U2 rover on the moon from the Chang'e mission from China. It's a cute little rover. Moves pretty quick, but let's see if I can pull up my web pages here. Oh, and we have a few different resources. So International Dark Sky Association is one resource that we can all use. And it is really international, but it's not the only one. For us here in Pennsylvania, there is a Pennsylvania Outdoor Lighting Council that correlates a lot of this information. A lot of it's from International Dark Sky Association, but that's pretty far into the weeds. Let's make this easy. Globeatnight.org is one of the easiest, most simple resources for light pollution, tracking it and correlating the data. So there's a little bit of NASA work, citizen science projects, and a bunch of other organizations involved, and a handful of universities and things like that, all working with this data. So here is globeatnight.org. If you want to go straight to the web app, it's globeatnight.org/web app. But if we scroll around a little bit, basically the the Globe at Night website is an international campaign highlighting the impact of light pollution. And so we're losing the night sky. We're building more infrastructure. Our cities are getting bigger. There's more people. And if we start to do the smart thing and start to reduce our output of light and really stop wasting the energy by sending it to the sky and direct it to where we need it, we can preserve this natural resource we've had for a long time. For thousands of years, the only light pollution were the fires that we've made. And now with light bulbs and things like that, we have a lot more to worry about. So I'm not going to go into fully shielded lighting as much, but I would like to show you this web app, this website. So Globe at Night chooses an easy constellation, some of the brightest stars you have overhead, and it explores what we can see beyond it. Now, if you're in downtown Philly, you'd be lucky to catch some of the brighter stars. Two stars, Boötes, in Boötes, Arcturus, and coming up in the summer sky, Vega, but we'll get there a little bit later. I'm going to talk about Boötes. So right after the sun goes down, we start to see stuff coming out in our sky. Now, you don't want to look into the sky when the moon is out, so we're going to concentrate all collection of this data to 5 days around the new moon. So that's actually coming up. If we check back here, it gave us the actual dates from June 13th to June 22nd. Those are going to be the best days to take this data. So if you're looking up at your night sky, hopefully you're able to see any stars at all, and we want to make sure we're at least an hour after sunset. I try to wait at least 2 hours before taking any of this info, but 1 hour afterward, you should start to see some of the brighter stuff. Here it's nice and highlighted, and we'll talk about what's in the sky later. I think a few other people are going to talk about brighter things in the sky and some dim stuff, but we're going to look for the brightest stars first. So let's break out one of these charts. Now, here we have magnitude charts. So when we start talking magnitude, we're talking about how dark the sky is. I think if I can pull up the Bortle scale here, if I'm fighting with the taskbar here. Here we go. So here's a night sky where in an urban setting, you're not going to see a whole lot. You have those light particles, dust in the sky, collecting the light, the scattered light, and brightening our sky. You don't really get to see much beyond it. As you get to more and more suburban areas, you can start to see a little bit more, some of the brighter stars out in your sky. And of course, as you get more rural, as you get to actual dark sites, you can even have a chance to see the Milky Way with your naked eye. Not everyone gets to see this. You have to travel. If you live in an urban area, you have to get out of the city to catch something like this. I know Ted has some sites in mind, but here's the Milky Way. All of these images are from the same place, but we have different light pollution. It looks like they took this during sunset. So we have different dimnesses in our sky, all the way down to the dimmest possible. And even dimmer than that, you're putting things into space outside our atmosphere. So our atmosphere is one thing to consider. And the higher up you are, the less light pollution. But we're not all going to be able to send telescopes out into space. So we're going to look for areas where you're not looking with any lights in your direction. You're not going to have any stores in front of you, hopefully, any street lights. Maybe you can talk to your community. And actually, through Globe at Night, you can sponsor a street. But we'll check back to the main site in just a little bit. So magnitude 0, you're really looking at a sky that you can only see the bright stuff. Arcturus and Jupiter are here. We'll take a closer look at these constellations later, but let's go back here. And you know what? Let's go straight to the web app. So I'm going to go globeatnight.com, or globeatnight.org, excuse me, /web app. 2 P's on the app. And it pulls us right into this thing. So on a phone, it works out great. It's like a little app. You can set a shortcut to it, but it's globeatnight.org/web app. So number 1, after you're in that period around a new moon, 5 days before or after, you're going to have the darkest conditions available to you. So you want to take note of the date. You want to make sure your time is 1 hour after sunset or later. I prefer later, but we all have a bedtime. You want to make sure you're taking it from exactly where you are. The data is important to get as accurate as you can, so you want to get as close to where you are as possible. So you can actually bring it up on the map. You can actually punch in your GPS points, or if you're on your phone or other device, you can hit that GPS button, and it'll tell you exactly where you are. So after we narrow down the date, the time, and where you're taking this data from, during one of these campaigns where we take the darkest available sky. Now we're going to start to look at what we can see. So here we have magnitude 0 skies, and you want to compare these charts. Now, there's only a few charts here at the bottom, and as we click through, we'll see more and more stars. Now, this is a pretty star-littered field. This is as good as it gets. So let's say I'm in a suburban area, and I'm only seeing the brightest stuff overhead. Now, finding Arcturus or finding Vega, knowing which is which, that'll take a little sky know-how. In dimmer skies, you're actually going to find the Big Dipper there. One trick I like to use is to arc to Arcturus. So if you imagine the Dipper as a spoon or a bowl, you go to the handle side, and those 3 stars, you continue that pattern, that arc, to Arcturus. So that sort of lets us know which star we're looking at. And of course, if you know a little bit about your skies, you can figure out which star is where if you know which direction you're facing. So we're going to get a little darker here. Now we can start to see some of the stars that make up Boötes here. Sort of looks like a kite. They call him the herdsman, but I don't see it. You can sort of make up your own stories. That's what I'd like to do. But here it looks like it zooms in a little bit. We're at a darker magnitude, but we're seeing a lot more background stars, stars that you really don't see unless you have binoculars or you're at a very dark site. So if you're in a city setting, you'd be lucky to catch some of these stars, but as we get to darker and darker areas, we can start to figure out where we are. Now, I'm talking about Boötes, a spring constellation, and as we go through the year, we see different constellations, but one other spring constellation, Hercules, is also available in the same way with these magnitude charts. So really, we're finding what we can and trying to match the chart as best we can. So I'm going to jump back to the website here and jump back to the campaign dates. And here we have all of the months through the end of the year. And so Boötes is one that will stick around. Hercules goes through the next few months. But one star you're going to see in our sky coming up is Vega. That's in our summer sky. So really the brightest things you're going to have in your sky at this time, and I'll hand that over for those, Vega, Jupiter, and Boötes, and Arcturus, excuse me. Arcturus in Boötes are going to be the brightest things. So we'll jump to our charts. Here we go. So here we have our night sky. Right after sunset, and of course around our horizon, we see that atmosphere getting a little thicker, maybe a little haze. But we should see the Big Dipper pretty much overhead, and we're going to arc to Arcturus, bringing us towards the south, towards the southwest. So globe at night is one of the tools that we can use to start to correlate this information. And like I said, as we're going through the years here, we're seeing more and more light pollution, more infrastructure put in. So I'm going to load this light pollution map. This is just one tool, lightpollutionmap.info. There are plenty of dark site finders. Choose your favorite, but I'm going to zoom in here and change this map to, let's just jump back to 2016. And if you notice, well, we have super bright areas. The red is going to be super bright, and out here in the ocean, there's no light. So our purple regions, our brownish gray regions, those aren't going to be as heavily light polluted. So I'm going to refresh back from 2016 into 2019. And that wasn't as quick, so you can't get the flicker effect there. But we definitely have more light pollution now than ever. And unless we do something, it's just going to get worse and worse. And what light pollution does, it can affect not just your vision, but it actually affects your health. People who live in light polluted areas are more prone to breast and prostate cancer. Wildlife in the area doesn't survive like it needs to. The ecosystem is affected by the lights that we build. Of course, all the infrastructure we put out, like roads and houses too. And also even the plants. Take notice of any trees that might be in a parking lot around lights that are lit all the time. And those are going to be not doing as well as some of the trees that you might see out further away from populated areas. I'm going to try to refresh this one more time. So here you can start to see the structures where we have heavily light polluted areas, and now we're starting to see them connect more and more. So here we have New York City, Philadelphia, and we can see even the highway structures with these light pollution maps. So in tracking light pollution on the ground, it's handy to have these satellites and tools, but Globe at Night is one tool where we can start to document how bad it's getting in our area, and or how good it is, how much better it can be. I'm actually in talks with my city council here in Reading to reduce our light pollution footprint. And I'd highly encourage you to go out to your municipality, your city, your local city council, and talk about light pollution, see what your local ordinances are. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about light pollution is not just from what we see down here on the ground, or looking down on the ground and around our areas, but if you happen to be out in a dark place, you can look up into our sky and start to find some satellites. Now, there's thousands of satellites up right now. There is a promised tens of thousands of satellites over the next few years. And this is just one other angle into light pollution that I'd like to consider. So light pollution is something that affects us all, and it's the resource for our natural sky. And one way that you can make a difference, that you can start to, that you can get involved, is to check out globeatnight.org, go to the web app, /web app, and start to take some of this data down. It's important to notice what we can while we can. So wait for that clear, dark sky. Take note of how cloudy it might be. You really don't want to be observing during a rainstorm, but sky cloudier than half, it might be worth trying the next night. So we want to wait for a clear, dark night for the best possible data. And even if it's hazy in your area, it's possible to still take this information. You can write down the different conditions, any comments, things like that. If you happen to have a sky quality meter, go ahead and write that in, and be sure to submit that data, to send that in, and then we can start to see where this information ends up. So globeatnight.org is a citizen science project. You don't have to be a professor. You don't have to be an authority on it. But what you got to do is you got to get out and look up at your clear, dark skies. So if we all take note and all take part, here you can start to see some of the data points popping up. Where I am in the Reading area, we have a few data points out here from some dark sites, and of course from the center of Reading. So with that,
Elan,
I'd like to thank you for, yeah.
Can you scroll us down to our area? Because I was looking at our area and we don't have anything in there. Can you get us down to Philadelphia? So
I'm not sure if it's taking it.
Here's our challenge, everybody. I can see Elan's effect already because you can see the data up there in the Reading area. So what I wanted to do was have us not only do Philadelphia, you know, it's already hard to prevent light pollution there, but it's a good spot to practice from because we'd really like to collect the data out at Muddy Run. And what the idea behind this was, Elan's going to join us out there as a volunteer. We're going to dedicate a time right after we do a Muddy Run event and take people up on the hillside there so they can get a really good view of the night sky. He can show you with a laser where the constellations are for those of you who have a hard time finding them. And we wanted to collect some data out there because we have the same challenge out there in Holtwood, Pennsylvania, as Elan has up in Berks County. We've got encroaching light pollution. And the only way we can actually, you know, figure out how it's happening is to really start taking data points. And that means you can be involved. You can be one of the citizen scientists that actually make that happen. If you look at the map right here, and you guys want to know about when everyone says, oh, Cherry Springs, Elan, see if you can find Coldersport. It's up in the upper left-hand side. You're close. Yep. Go up, you're there. So right about there is Cherry Springs, one of the darker areas. That's one of the areas we're actually trying to save. Believe it or not, as you head east on Route 80 there, you can actually start to see the glow of New York. And I'd say once you get past Williamsport and start heading over, you start to see some of that glow too. So Elan's kind of dedicated himself to seeing if he can get people the first step to a problem is just making people aware of it. And I'd like to thank you, Elan, for coming on board and making us a little bit more aware about the project.
Elan, before you change your screen, what was that Pennsylvania website again?
There is, well, there's also the International Dark Sky
Right, I have that one,
Association.
but I was curious about Pennsylvania Outdoor, because there is a light that flashes white all night long, and I think it should turn to red. And I wanted to look at this. I thought they should turn to red at night because I'm sure it's messing up the wildlife and everything else where it is. So
this is one of the conversations we need to start, and we need to start now. The best time to start was yesterday, but now we have the chance to go in and see what changes we can make. And light trespass is a real thing that people deal with. So definitely look into your ordinances in your local area, get as specific as possible before we try to take things. Writing Congress might not be the most effective way right now. So go to your local, or get in touch with your local municipality and see what you can do. There are some resources here. A lot of them actually reroute to the International Dark Sky Association, but we do have some things written out here as well.
Yes, I wanted to look at that. Thank you.
Go ahead, get to the International Dark Sky, Elan.
So, International Dark Sky Association also has lots about light pollution.
And what you'll find here, and Elan, this is where you'll strike a bell with a lot of people. I know 4 or 5 who've talked to me in the club. Light trespass. When you have that really bright floodlight in your neighbor's yard shining into your yard. If you go to the site here, there's actually letters that they show you, sample letters that you can do to contact your neighbor to take an informative stance about what they're doing with the lights. So I know I deal with it. Well, I have an entire casino in my backyard, so I don't think that Parks is going to take their giant jumbo video screens and turn them all red for me, but those of you who have a neighbor who has something like that, there's actually some good ideas here on how to take care of that. Thank you, Elan. So if Elan, if you hang out, we'll know you're here at the end, and if anyone has some questions at that time, we'll do it, but it's easier for us to go from person to person right now. So if you want to
I'll hand it back over.
Okay, and I'd like to introduce everybody to our vice president, Denise Vecca. Denise has her own Star Lab, and you can tell she's in it right now.
I wish.
No, but it is. That's her backdrop from her Star Lab. And Denise has been with us quite a while, and she does a segment with us called the Planet Report. So take it away, Denise.